So this is Matthew Pence, and he is an attorney with the Stage organization, maybe Page.
Yeah.
I get them confused sometimes.
It's one and the same.
And so, yeah, they are one and the same. And so he is here, and he is going to give you all that kinds of information that you need. And he's going to also hold some time open at the end for you to ask questions. And I think it's a good time, if you do have questions, to ask those questions. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over.
All right. Well, thank you all very much for having me. My name is Matthew Pence. I'm one of the attorneys at Page. And so I deal with school and employment law, and a lot of what I deal with in the course of my practice is the Code of Ethics, and I think I've given everybody a copy of the Code of Ethics. Just so I know, are you guys student teaching when? When are y'all coming up on student teaching? All right. So it's getting close there to getting out in your career. Before I went to law school, I taught high school. I taught high school in North Carolina. We have a similar code of ethics that nobody in my course of teaching, and I did it for 6 years, ever really pointed me to. And it's very, very serious. Georgia is probably one of the more active states in enforcing the code of ethics. I think last week I got maybe 7 or 8 phone calls with people who have been reported to the PSC for an ethical violation on their license. Just before we get into the actual code of ethics, what I'll say is the PSC gives you your license. And what the PSC gives, the PSC can take away, or they can also put some dings on it. So if y'all want to open up in the middle, take a look at that blue bar. That right there is the kind of halfway down that blue bar is what they can do. And if you notice down at the bottom, no probable cause is what you want. If you're ever reported to the PSC, you want no probable cause. Y'all, right now, in a given year, about 3,000 educators across the state of Georgia are being reported to the PSC. That's a lot. Most of those educators are walking away with no probable cause, and that is very, very good. That is very good. That means it's sort of like not guilty. You know, they shred everything. You never have to report it because there was no probable cause, and you move on. But if you notice up in the middle, as you go up all the way to the top, they can revoke licenses. And I will talk to you about situations that I have seen where a license has been revoked. The PSC is not like criminal court. If people call me, for example, if somebody calls me and says, I just killed somebody and I intended to do it, okay, I'm going to say, well, one or two things is going to happen to you, because the law says that one of two things will happen. You will spend the rest of your life in prison, and you will die naturally, or you will spend the rest of your life in prison, and the state of Georgia will, by law, kill you. But with the PSC, you don't get that. There are no written rules. And so I have been to PSC meetings when they sit around and argue about what are we going to do to this teacher. And I have seen them argue over, should we suspend this teacher for 15 days or 16 days? I mean, they really argue about these things because there are no written rules. So with the PSC, you never know what something is going to mean. But I'm going to tell you some of the things that I have seen come out of the PSC and what they have given to teachers. One of the things I'll say at the outset, when you get employed, this comes with your license. You become a teacher in Bibb County schools, this governs you in Bibb County. If you go to Fulton County, same rules govern. But one of the things that you want to get acquainted with as a teacher, as an employee, is your school system's own local policies and procedures. And I'll bring up stuff like that as well. So, let's take a look at the standards. Standard 1, abiding by the law. You got to abide by the law. Everybody has to. But there are 3 situations where the PSC wants to know if you have broken the law. Key word in Standard 1 is conviction. Okay? Conviction is important. The PSC does not care about accusations. The PSC cares about convictions. Number 1, if you've been convicted of a felony. Number 2, if you have been convicted of a crime involving moral turpitude. And I'll get there in a second. And number 3, if you've been convicted of any drug possession whatsoever. The PSC added the drug part because they got really sick and tired of seeing teachers get busted with marijuana. And they got tired of hearing about it. And so they decided to add in that part a few years ago. I don't know exactly when they did it. DUIs don't have to report. But, and this is where I said earlier, you need to get acquainted with your school system. Just about every school system in this state has a policy or rule that says if you are charged with a DUI, as your employer, we expect you to report that to us. Chatham County Schools has a rule that says all of our employees at all times will behave accordingly. And what does that mean? I don't know what that means. It means what they want it to mean at any given time. So things like that, anything like that, you know, not speeding tickets, but just about generally anything else, is just a matter of basic good employer-employee relations. You might want to report to your principal, because the one thing people call me a lot from smaller, especially in smaller communities, Monday morning, I got arrested this weekend for fill in the blank. Do I need to tell my principal? And I'll say, you know, as a general rule, we'll look at your policies, and if there's not a policy there, then maybe you don't under policy. But in a small town in the South where there is one newspaper, and your mugshot is going to be, or your name is going to be, or somebody's mama knows somebody down at the jail, it might be best. I have never seen a principal go, I've had that conversation a lot. I've never seen a principal in this state lose it over that. I mean, I think they realize that life happens. Crimes involving moral turpitude. I got a call the other day from an HR director. When you get your license, you just submit stuff to HR. They submit it to the PSC to make sure that everything's on board when you renew. And she said, I'm going through some stuff here, and they run your criminal every 5 years. And she said, I just found something. We have a person here who many years ago was convicted of shoplifting. Is that a crime involving moral turpitude? And the answer to that question is yes. That is a crime involving moral turpitude, so it should have for many years been reported to the PSC. Now, there could be glitches here of why it wasn't. It could be a mistake, but a crime involving moral turpitude, even if it's a misdemeanor, has to be reported to the PSC. The PSC lists out what they consider shoplifting, theft by trickery, passing bad checks, which is not bouncing a check. I mean, those are different. Bouncing a check is a mistake. Passing a series of bad checks there's a criminal intent there. So those are the 3 times that you have to report breaking the law to the Professional Standards Commission. Standard 2, conduct with students. I'm going to skip over that one temporarily and come back to it at the end. Standard 3, let's take a look at that one. Alcohol or drugs. I used to say that I didn't ever see this one. And I saw it recently. And this person will get reported to the PSC if she hasn't already. Get a phone call, and this person says to me, it's like a Friday night, it's Friday morning, and Thursday night, I decided to party a little bit. It's like, okay, great. Problem is, she showed up at school with alcohol in her breath. Okay? And I said, are you drunk right now? And she was like, well, my principal certainly thinks I am. And I'm going, oh, this is not good. Okay, number one, PSC, we know that driving under the influence, 0.08. Okay, but for matters of PSC, it is 0.01. They do not, it's a no tolerance, do not come to school with alcohol on your breath kind of policy. And employers also have that as a policy anyway. So now she says, my principal has summoned me to the office, and the police are here with a breathalyzer. And my principal is telling me to take a breathalyzer. This was the legal advice I had to give. And this is not, I don't enjoy having to do this, but this is just the situation as it is. Ma'am, you have 2 options. You can be fired for being under the influence of alcohol at school. You could possibly blow a 0.08 or higher, and you just told me you drove to school this morning. So you could be cuffed and taken away. You can be fired for being drunk at school and reported to the PSC. Or you can be fired for insubordination and refuse to take the drug test, because they can give you a directive to take that test. And she said, well, which one should I do? And I said, you need to get fired for insubordination. That's what you need to do. And she is going to be reported to the Professional Standards Commission. And they will not look highly on that at all. They do not like hearing about alcohol at school. And that will be, going back to that blue bar, a suspension at least. That's not going to be a warning. That's not going to be a written reprimand. That is going to be a suspension, unless the attorneys that I referred her to can work some magic. And by that, I mean some magic. Because it's a zero tolerance. I don't care who's getting married, nor does the PSC. I don't care what, great party is going to happen this weekend, nor does the PSC. If you're under the influence of alcohol still from the night before, the best thing to do is just not go to work the next day. So, because you just don't want to run the risk of losing your license. So that's standard 3. And standard 3 also encompasses providing alcohol to students. I think that's kind of covered. Standard 4, honesty. See, in this one a lot more, they're attaching honesty to other things. You didn't report something to us like you were supposed to. If you look briefly at standard 9, you're supposed to report certain things. They'll say you didn't report something to us like you were supposed to, and in not reporting, you were also dishonest. I mean, they will tack everything on that they possibly can. Standard 4, what I've seen happen is when people abuse sick leave. That is the big thing with the PSC. I had a person call me the other day and she said, I'm done, I'm out of here, I don't like this school system, I don't like this school. And I'm like, hey, I've heard a lot about that school system, I don't blame you. And she said, I've resigned effective at the end of the year. Perfect. I'm going to some other state. Perfect. And she said, I have enough sick days for the end of the year. And I just put in to take like 20-something sick days. And my principal told me no. And I said, yeah, because you're not sick. The state of Georgia has an actual law. I can't believe as much as Georgia does a hands-off in some of this, it also does a very much a hands-on. There is an actual law in the state of Georgia that defines what it means to be sick. Actually defines what that means for teacher purposes if you're calling in sick. And it's you're ill, immediate family member, things like that. But, so she was not sick, so she could not take sick leave. There is a case that came out of the PSC where a lady took sick leave, and she was not sick. She was going out of state for her daughter's wedding. She took 4 days of sick leave, which was really personal leave, and off she went to her daughter's wedding. It got busted, and what makes this so easy to bust, and I'll come back to this with standard 2, is this thing called Facebook. Makes it so easy to bust. 4 days. So now, somehow, her school system gets wind of the fact that she has done this. So now they have paid a substitute for 4 days. They have also, because she has cashed in sick leave, they have paid her for 4 days. Well, now they're mad, and y'all school systems don't have any money for any of this stuff anymore. So they say, we are going to take back our 4 days of pay that we gave you. And I mean, they cut the check, so it's real easy for them to do that. They just subtract. And now we're going to report you to the PSC. The PSC suspends her for 10 days. So your license gets suspended. You can't go to work because really while you're under suspension, number 1, the PSC says you cannot be at any school. And number 2, for those 10 days, she's not a certified teacher. And so now she has lost 14 days of pay. On any future application, she has to tell the employer that she has been reported to the PSC and the PSC has taken action against her license. 14 days of pay, I think a month is like 22. She almost lost a full month of pay. All she had to do, veteran teacher, she had the personal leave built up. All she had to do was put in for it. And the PSC says dishonest. Another place where they're really getting people. Some school systems, surprisingly, have money to pay teachers to tutor after school and timesheets, and some teachers have to drive from school to school. That's another place where they're really checking, is on these timesheets that people are submitting. And it used to be they kind of, the money, 10 years ago, the money was great. And now they are really checking up on that. So in every piece of paper, be honest, be honest, be honest. If you are, I got a call from a guy the other day. Well, when I say the other day, I'm, like 2-3 months ago. School system A says he's not tenured, and they say, we don't want you here anymore. We are going to non-renew you. And he resigns. So now he has been told, we are going to non-renew you, and he resigns. He goes to school system B, and they ask him a question on his application. Have you ever resigned in the face of non-renewal? What's the answer to that question? Yes. Absolutely you have. And he says, nope, sure haven't. And they check on these things. They found it. School system B busts it. Reports him to the PSC. The PSC's initial recommendation, and this was bad, and it's being appealed to a judge because this was just, in my opinion, they can be a little crazy with these things. The PSC's initial recommendation was a 3-year suspension of his teaching license. A 3-year suspension of a teaching license, y'all, is tantamount to a revocation, okay? 3-year suspension is tantamount to revocation. And I went, God, you know, there might be something else there. I don't know. I didn't listen to the PSC discuss it, but that's when I say there are no rules. You know, I would never have expected that. But they take honesty very, very seriously. They expect teachers to show good character of honesty. So that's standard 4. Standard 5, public funds and property. Joe and I were having this conversation earlier because this call came in not too long ago. Towards the end of the year, it gets really active. And this lady took up money to buy something. Letter home to parents, please send $50, I don't know. Please send X amount of dollars. This is what I'm going to buy for, you know, with this money. Then the whatever it was she was going to buy doesn't come home, you know. And so parents, and this is in a rural community, not a lot of money floating around. They start calling the school. She doesn't return their phone calls. Big problem there. They start calling the principal. The principal starts investigating into this, and he goes to her and he says, I need statement, I need this, where's that money? And she said, well, I did what we always did, which was sort of custom around here, was that I took that money, I deposited it into my own account. Here's my bank statement that the principal now has. This is where, and see, this is where I deposited it. And see, all this stuff's on back order. And he said, you can't do that. It's like, it's always the way it's been done here. He got statements from her in writing. He got copies of her bank. I mean, she handed all of these things over. And why shouldn't she? That is her employer, you know, and that's getting a directive. And now they have enough to report her to the Professional Standards Commission, who will take action against her license. Not only are they going to report her, they're going to turn over her bank statement. They're going to turn over everything that she wrote. If you are ever asked to give a statement, and my guess is you will be at some point in your career, things happen, kids get in fights, kids bite, I mean, things happen. If you are ever asked to give a statement, and you are a member of Page, the first thing that I would say to you is just give me a call first and email it to me, and I'll take a look at it. Because she sent me the statement after the fact, and I'm going, oh my gosh, you know, you just really lots of implications here that are not going to bode well for you before the PSC. Another thing with public funds and property that I don't think the PSC would really entertain is email, school email. There is a situation out of, I think it was Wisconsin. You know, I got work email and I had school email, but this teacher on her school email was talking about a kid's IEP, something school related with like the guidance counselor, somebody like that. And she said, you know, Johnny needs this, his academic needs. This right now, y'all, is fine. Perfect. Academic needs, his grades. Next paragraph. The real problem here is this little boy's mother. Let me tell you about her. She's a real blank, 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 all kinds of things. Thanks for letting me vent. Bye. Her email, for whatever reason, got hit with an open records request. Every state has an open records law, sunshine law. Certain state property emails that are funded by the state can be, on an open records request, be turned over to the person who's requesting them. And things like that, personal thoughts, things of that nature, are not going to get redacted. And that, I'm sure that was not a good parent-teacher conference to go to. So I always tell people, look, have your personal email, have your school email. Don't access the personal email at school. Not on a school network. Just leave them as separate as you possibly can. Use your school email for school purposes. Keep it short, keep it sweet. And if you take a quick look at Standard 7 that deals with confidential information, you can discuss children over email. You absolutely can. Chatham County Schools has a rule that I think every school system in this state should have. And I want you to use this in your career, because I think that it's an extra protection for you. If you're going to email somebody at your school, a colleague, about a student, start out, so you're emailing somebody about, you know, Jane Doe. Start out with, I'm emailing you about Jane D. And from that point on, refer to her as like her or she, or just by her initials. You know, don't use a full name. That's just an extra protection so somebody could never come along and say you shared confidential information or something like that. But that's Standard 5, public funds and property. School money, let me just say this, the mistake that this lady I was telling you about made, here's what you do with money. You'll have a money bag. There will be certain rules in place at your school or in your system about that money bag. Know those rules. Follow those rules as best as you can, but just be even more prudent. You get money, take that money up, receipt it on the spot. There's another case that came out of PSC. She didn't receipt on the spot. And some parents still pay in cash. And it kind of piled up on her desk. And if it's anything like my desk, things piled up on top of it. And then some cash got lost. And so the school's got to account for that. So here's what you do. Have a certain designated time that you take up money, receipt that money, give that money to those kids, put that money in that money bag, and before you leave that school that day, there is a person to turn it into that person. Usually a bookkeeper. If you receipt money first thing in the morning and you can't see the bookkeeper until at least 2 o'clock, have a drawer in your file cabinet or in your desk that has a lock that only you have the key to, and lock it up. With everything that deals with money, they take it. School systems take it seriously. It is a terminable offense, so just be real careful and real prudent with money. That's Standard 5. Standard 6. This is actually the last holdout. I've never seen Standard 6 come across my desk with anything. So usually, it used to be a lot of these I could say, I've never seen this. In the past few weeks, I've seen just about everything. But Standard 6. You will get presents as a teacher. I got some of them, and this is what Standard 6 deals with. I got some of them. I still have some of them. Standard 6 is not meant to say to you that your children cannot give you gifts and that you cannot accept them. That is not what Standard 6 is about. Standard 6 is about taking gifts that are very, very expensive. Okay? 99.9999999% of those gifts that you get, you will be able to keep. $50 is the threshold. They're not giving out gifts that cost $50 anymore. If it's a little Christmas ornament, coffee cup, it's yours. Keep it. Don't worry about the PSC. If it is a $100 gift card, please give it back and report to your administrator that you got it and to give it back. Another thing that I'm starting to hear grumblings about, some teachers are starting businesses on their own that kind of relate to their specialty. I'm seeing a lot of special ed teachers start businesses. And that opens up some of this. Starting a business and then starting to serve students that go to your school. Now you have sort of a different interest here, a different separate financial interest here. Starting to hear about that a little bit. Haven't seen it yet. Don't know what's going to happen with that one. But I would say if you go that route, just be careful that you're not advertising at school for your business. Be careful that you're not, when you're meeting with a parent to talk about their child, that you're not saying, oh, hey, and by the way, I provide this sort of service, things like that. If you have 2 jobs, you want to keep those, kind of like with the money and with the email, you want to keep certain things separate. But really, this one right here, Standard 6 is just, it's the idea of a conflict of interest. It is buying grades. You don't want to make it look like you are currying favor. You don't want to make it look like something bad's going on. So that's Standard 6. Like I said, I don't think I've ever seen a PSC charge letter with Standard 6. Standard 7, confidential information. Confidential information is governed by a federal law called the Family Education Rights Privacy Act, FERPA. And FERPA basically says that schools have to keep a lot of things confidential. And I asked the attorney whose office is next door to mine, she goes to PSC all the time, and I went to her one time and I said, listen, how often really does FERPA get violated? What FERPA means is when teachers go out in the community and start talking about things they learn at school. And y'all will learn a lot of stuff about a lot of families in your role. You will learn stuff that's just, you will learn medical history, you will learn, obviously, educational history, personal stuff. And I said, come on, how often does this really happen? And she said, it's happening probably somewhere right now. And the typical story is, and it happens, you see it more in I guess your smaller towns because sort of more people know everybody. My stepmom is a 5th grade teacher in the one high school town that I grew up in North Carolina. And, you know, I mean, I know how it is. You know, my stepmom teaches 5th grade. She'll run into somebody who teaches 10th grade and, you know, at the high school. And half of our family teaches at the high school. And they just run into them at the grocery store and they just get to talking. And really what it turns out to is that somebody's in the grocery store. Do you have Jane Doe? You know, did you have Jane Doe in the 4th grade? Yeah, I had Jane Doe in the 4th grade. Was she telling y'all she was a diabetic then? Yeah, she was telling that same lie when she was in the 4th grade. You know, and that's like pushing. And then what do you know? Jane Doe and her mom are over there on the next aisle over. And really what happens, it's not that the mom is over there. It's just that other people hear these things and they realize that that's not an appropriate conversation. And they don't know, the general public, I think, is not aware of the PSC. But they are aware of the county office, you know, and that's who they'll report to. And if you take a quick look at Standard 9, everybody has to report. And so that's how things like that get taken to the PSC. Anything you learn in the course of your duties as an educator about a student, about a family, that is confidential. That is absolutely confidential. Now, you're going to a conference tomorrow. You have to have a sub. Little Jane Doe is diabetic. And she has to have her blood checked every day at 1 o'clock. Can you tell the sub that little Jane Doe has to get up from her seat, go to the school nurse, get her finger pricked, and come back? Can you tell the sub that? Absolutely, you can tell the sub that. That is the educator's right to know, okay? If you have a sub, you can certainly tell them things that they will need to know in the course of that classroom. I mean, you wouldn't want this kid, you know, going into any kind of having like diabetic issues in class or anything like that. Another thing that pops up under FERPA, and this is if any of y'all go into the school counseling realm, there are certain things that school counselors and only school counselors are allowed to keep secret. I had a teacher call me one time and she said, I've kind of got, and you will get these kids that come under your wing, and she said, I've got this kid that I really work with, bad home life, and he really tells me about, you know, things that go on at home. That happens, it's going to happen. And she's like, but now the IEP meeting is coming up and the mom really wants to know about the nature of our conversations and they're not a positive portrayal of her. And I'm really concerned about telling. And I said, you have to tell. Because the law, the federal law itself is focused on the parents' rights. It's focused on the family's rights to know about their child and his or her academic what goes on at school. And academic does not mean grades. It basically means what goes on at school. So that's confidential information, Standard 7. Let's take a look at Standard 8. This is the one-time contracts. This is the one time where PSC writes down a rule. To be employed as a teacher, you will sign a contract. A school system will expect that of you. I've seen some people slip through without signing a contract. You want to sign a contract. That contract gives you protections. The secretary at your school, she is employee at will. She can be fired really at any time for any lawful reason. A teacher under a contract cannot. That you want to sign that contract for that reason, and also because the contracts that you sign go towards what is called tenure. You got to sign 4 of them. And if you work a school year without signing a contract, you haven't met part of the tenure law. You haven't signed the contract. So you want to sign the contract. But people call me and they say, I signed this contract, I'm teaching in whatever school system, I don't like this school system, I don't like this school, and I want to get out of this contract. Well, the contract itself will not, whereas that secretary can be fired at any minute, she can also quit at any minute. And whereas that contract keeps a teacher from being fired at any given second, it also keeps that teacher from just quitting. If you sign a contract and in the course of that contract you need to get out of that contract, you have to start with your school system. You have to ask your school system to be released from your contract. Many of them will work with teachers on that. I know of a few of them who will not. They absolutely not. You signed a contract, we expect you to stick to it, you will honor your contract. But many of them will work with people. Sometimes people have to get out of their contracts. If you are sick, so sick that you cannot work, the PSC says you do not need to honor your contract. If your spouse or a child, the PSC says you will not need to honor your contract. If your spouse moves across the country, you will not need to honor that contract. You have a right to go be with that person. and if you get a promotion within the field of education. You're a teacher in Bibb County and Peach County just offered you an AP's position, and it's September. You can go and take that AP's position and not worry about your license getting action taken against it by the PSC. But there are people who walk, they try to get out, the school system says no, they say I can't take this anymore, I'm done. And the PSC says, this is their one rule, we will suspend your license in that regard for 90 days. So some people, they'll have this perfect, here you are in school system A, you got this great job set up in school system B where everything's going to be perfect, and school system A says, no, we're not going to let you out of your contract. Then they go over to school system B, and everything might be perfect, but then the PSC comes along and suspends their license for 90 days. And now at this point, they're not qualified for the job anymore, and school system B can then move for termination. It is not good. When people tell me, when we come to that point in a conversation where a school system will not let somebody out of their contract, and there's no PSC exception, like illness, spousal transfer, I tell them that they need to honor their contract. Another thing with contracts that never happens, but possibly could, but it will never happen, is if you do break a contract, even for a reason that the PSC says is okay, the school system could sue for breach of contract. That will never happen. And the reason it will never happen, although it could happen, is because contract damages are not meant to be high. It's not like a negligence claim where you're going to get punitives. Contract damages are very low. By the time a school system spends $20,000 on lawyers' fees, they get out of somebody $5,000. It's just, cost benefit. It's just not going to happen. Some school systems, Rockdale County has what's called a liquidated damages clause in their contract. And what that means is they say, if you break this contract, you will pay us. If you have to get out of this contract, you will pay us this amount. And by you signing it, you agree to it. Last year it was $5,000. This year they gave out contracts last week. They've kindly reduced it to $2,500. But there's most of them, I think Bibb has a $500. Most of them are like $500. Rockdale, they slung the $5,000, and now they've reduced it to $2,500. So, which is still a lot of money. I mean, who's got $2,500 just laying around to hand to Rockdale County Schools, So that's standard 8. 90-day suspension, though. Bottom line, 90-day suspension for people who are, I don't use the term convicted, but who get in trouble under standard 8. Standard 9, required reporting. A lot of activity here. This is the saddest standard of them all. People call me and they say, should I report? Before I even hear what they say, I say yes. If you're asking me, should you report? The answer is going to be yes. There's never a, no, don't report. This is where revocations happen. There's 2 cases that I know of. There's a case where a little girl at a middle school, the teachers kind of got an inkling that she was being abused at home. Okay? They just, bruises, scratches. They did what they were supposed to do. They reported it. At your school, there will be somebody to report to. Counselor, administrator, usually, or it's who you report to. They wrote it up and reported it to the counselor. They gave it to the counselor. I don't know the time frame here, but over Thanksgiving, the little girl gets on the bus to go home for Thanksgiving, and over Thanksgiving break, her stepmother and her father beat her to death. Okay? So, oh really? Okay, I don't usually name systems, so yeah. Yeah. Now, teachers have reported. Teachers, no action. But now we have other people who have known about this. And the PSC, when you get something like that, and there's another case where a teacher just knew, did not do anything, just knew. Student, para, having a sexual relationship. Teacher knows about it, doesn't say anything, nothing. School system starts getting inklings of this. Well, this is also a crime. Police get involved. The teacher who knows sits down with the police and confesses all. I knew this was going on. Now the school system is furious. How dare you not report? We could have saved a lot of time, effort, and liability. We're reporting you to the PSC for just knowing that the teacher who knew about the sexual relationship, license revoked, gone. We'll never get it back. They'll tell people when they revoke your license, you can come back in 3 years and reapply. When I said at the PSC, they had a stack of reapplications that they had revoked. There was one lady that she had really rehabilitated herself, and they said, nope, I've never seen them give one back. In that situation with child abuse, People knew, didn't do anything about it. A child ended up dead. That is going to go straight to revocation territory. I'm trying to think of anything else under Standard 9, a few other things under Standard 9. What do you have to report? Any child abuse, you have to report any child abuse within 24 hours of when you can say with certainty child abuse is happening here, you have to report it within 24 hours. State law. If you know that there is something unethical going on, like if you know that Mrs. Smith down the hall skims a little money off the top of the money bag, you have 90 days to report it to the PSC. I tell people, don't wait 90 days. Just report it as soon as you know it. If you are in a team teacher situation and you know of child abuse and your colleagues know about it, all of you need to go report. Because it turns into, well, I thought she was going to report, but he said he was going to report. How about everybody just go report? You know, if it's Friday, you think this kid's being abused, kid's about to get on the bus, the principal's at a principal's meeting, the assistant principal's meeting with somebody's mother, and you can't find anybody, people call me and they say, what should I do? And I say, you need to get off the phone with me and you need to call the police or you need to call DFACS. You may have to go that route at some point in your career.
Let me stop you on that one right there because these are pre-service candidates and we need to be clear about the mandatory child abuse reporting law with them and how they report. Yes, I know that they're volunteers in the school, but you know that changed in July of 2012.
Yes. Everybody.
And so everybody is required to report, but where pre-service candidates are concerned, they're required to report, the way we understand it, to their immediate supervisor, which is their cooperating teacher.
Yeah.
Okay? And if you feel like the cooperating teacher has not followed up on it, then you can certainly report that to the principal. But it's really important that you're clear on what the reporting process is for that. And I'm thankful that since I've been involved in this program for 3 years, and I don't know before that, but the last 3 years, we have not been involved in any situations like that. And I don't want to scare you, but I want you to be very well aware of what the reporting procedure is for that, and it is very serious. So, you know, once you're certificated, you know, it really as a citizen, you're responsible. Anybody who is a citizen is responsible. But where you're concerned in a classroom, you report directly to your cooperating teacher immediately, not like sit on it, go home, you know, go out.
Think about it.
Talk about
No.
it to your friends, that kind of thing. You report it to your cooperating teacher. If you can't get to your cooperating teacher, you report it to an administrator that very moment. Okay.
Yeah, that's...
Sorry, I just need
no.
to make sure they understand.
You definitely, people sit on it. That's a lot of time. I've seen people sit on it for just 48 hours. And the law is very clear, 24. And I'll say, well, you know, at this point, you've waited too long, but you still need to report. You need to report, you need to report, you need to report. I think what's happening now, what we're seeing a lot of more is that school systems, and this is a good thing, are not adopting what I call a Penn State mentality. I report to you, you report to him, he reports to her, she reports to him, and everybody's reporting, and we have child abuse going on and nobody's stopping it. I mean, that's the goal. It's not to report all the time, it's to stop it. So, yeah, these things follow a chain of command, and you will definitely want to start with your cooperating teacher. You know, and also on top of that, when you get employed, going back to those local policies, take a look at them. If it's not in the local policy, it'll be in the faculty handbook. Take a look at it. Find out who. All right, so let's take a look at Standard 10, Professional Conduct. This is your catch-all. If the PSC can't get you in on 1 through 9 or 11, they're going to get you in on 10. And look at it. You are going to demonstrate conduct that follows generally recognized professional standards. What does that mean? I have no clue what that means. Nobody knows what that means. It means whatever the PSC wants it to mean whenever a file comes across their desk. There's some cases they've crammed in under PSC. I can think of 3 off the top of my head. You will see these things relate to one another at all. They brought a loaded gun to school. That was, they got on Standard 10. Organizing a gambling pool with students. That was Standard 10. It's pretty funny. And calling a mother and a student. There was a parent conference going on, and a teacher called a mother and this mother's child a series of bad names to their faces. Better than email, though, right? No, just kidding. I'm on film. I shouldn't be saying stuff like that. And so the PSC, those are certain things they've crammed under Standard 10. Standard 10 is where we see the most court activity because people are like, are you kidding me? Standard 10? I had one school system in Metro Atlanta school system, not Atlanta, but in Metro Atlanta, that there was a principal was threatening, the teacher was being like insubordinate. And the principal was threatening to report the teacher to the PSC for insubordination. The PSC doesn't care about things like that. That is an employer-employee kind of matter. But that's how Standard 10 is viewed. It is a catch-all. It is intentionally vague. And it's that way for a reason. And a lot of things get crammed in there. But we see the most court activity here because you have to have notice beforehand that something you're doing is wrong. And under Standard 10, with these vague terms, we don't really know that if people have been put on notice that something they're doing is wrong. And insubordination is, yes, it's unprofessional, but it's more for an employer kind of thing to handle. Get a write-up, get a reprimand, a PDP, non-renewal, those kinds of things. P.S. It's not ethical. It's not an ethical issue. Standard 11. Well, this is a hot topic these days. Standard 11 deals with, and this is a hot topic because the CRCT is going on, and I have gotten so many calls past 2 weeks. I did this during the CRCT, and my principal is writing me up. What on earth is going on? I'll tell you what's going on. What's going on is that 35 educators, former educators from the Atlanta Public Schools had to take the perp walk up to the Fulton County Jail a couple weeks ago, including the former superintendent. What happened in Atlanta? The very first time I ever did a COE, I did it at a school here in Bibb County, and I got to this one, and I said, what happened in Atlanta was criminal. And there was a group of teachers in the back, and they laughed at me, and I thought, what are they doing back there laughing at me for? It was criminal, and they just got into, and I was thinking like criminal, there is a state law that says you cannot take a state document, which a CRCT test is, and alter it. That's what I thought was criminal. The DA of Fulton County says that no, this was racketeering. And basically what he says is that the former superintendent of Atlanta Public Schools ran Atlanta Public as a criminal enterprise. And that the other people indicted with her were part of that criminal conspiracy. Most of the phone calls that I have gotten about CRCT this week, and you know, one lady here, she's given the CRCT, and this is my work phone, so I can't, and she drops her phone, falls out of her pocket. And the principal sees it. The principal writes her up for that, and she calls me, and she's mad. And I said, all right, that's a little crazy. Here's what you need to do. But she said, why is this happening? And I said, because the local media, that day that they turned themselves in, they were parked out there in front of the courthouse. I was at home that day, and I had the TV on. And every time, here come one of them, breaking news down at Fulton County Courthouse. Here comes another one. We have no idea who it is. And then here's this poor teacher, and her lawyers might be with her. And the lawyer's just like, standard, no comment, no comment, no comment. And the media is there with their camera. Don't you want to answer some question? How do you feel about this? It was awful. Beverly Hall, the former superintendent, shows up. Breaking news everywhere. And really what it is I guess that principals and superintendents don't want to take the walk of shame down to the Fulton County Courthouse these days. But dropping a phone during a test is not taking a test home and putting on rubber gloves so your fingerprints don't appear on that test when you change the answers. Dropping a phone during a test is not taking the cellophane wrapping on the CRCT but when it arrives and cutting it open with a knife, taking out the test, running copies of the test, putting it back in, and then taking a cigarette lighter and heating the plastic so it looks like it was never broken. That's something very different than, you've been walking around for 3 hours during the CRCT and you just need to sit down for a second and just so happens you get busted. But that's where the disconnect is. Obviously, Atlanta got a lot of bad publicity. The state of Georgia got a lot of bad publicity. Everybody wants to clean it up. The PSC wants to clean it up as well. Testing out of Atlanta Public Schools, revoke, revoke, revoke is probably what will happen. It still hasn't all made its way through the PSC. Nothing's going to change. Because what happened in Atlanta was not stray marks. What happened in Atlanta was not, double counting tests. What happened in Atlanta was people were intentionally changing answers to improve test scores. I don't know what happened here. But anyways, that's Standard 11. So let's take a look at Standard 2 real fast. I saved this one for last because you guys are a young audience, and I know that you all probably have a Facebook. Raise your hand if you've got a Facebook for me. Tell me who's got. I got one too. So, and I never say anything about what happened at work. Sometimes I want to. God, sometimes I want to, but I never do that because it says on there that I work, and people who, even if it didn't say there, people who know me, people know where I work. I had a lady call me one time, furious. Oh, she was mad. My principal got a copy of my Facebook. I'm not friends with him on Facebook. Is he hacking into my Facebook? I said, no. He's not hacking into your Facebook. Somebody you are friends with at school doesn't like you right now and is not being so friendly. And they printed off your Facebook. And what did she put on her Facebook? She put pictures from her classroom where there was like a piece of school-owned furniture that I guess the maintenance guys had come in over Christmas and done something with. She put a picture of it up with a caption of how irresponsibly done it was, and it was very clear she was talking about work, and her principal got wind of it, and instead of being a real jerk, he said, when you get home today, take it down. He can't make me do that. I have free speech. No, you don't. You do not have free speech. You have free speech not as an employee. Really, you do have free speech. Don't get me wrong, you do. You do not have you have the right to free speech. You do not have the right, and the Supreme Court has said this for 100 years, you do not have the right to teach for Bibb County schools, Houston County schools. You don't have the right to do that, you know? So it's a choice. Do you want to exercise your free speech rights, or do you want to continue to be an employee? Take your pick. Be really, really careful. Facebook is such a setup. You get home from work, it's been a long day, it asks you what's on your mind, and you know, it's such a setup. I got into an argument one day with it was a lawyer, opposing kind of counsel. And she said something to me that I felt was just really dumb. And I wanted to get home on Facebook, because and just say something, really just be a jerk. But you can't do that. Because you don't know who on that friends list at the moment is mad with you or doesn't like you and can really get back at you. There was a case out of Barrow County that many of you may have heard of that actually did get reported to the PSC, and the PSC said, we don't care, we are not investigating this. If they say that, that's good. She was at a wedding reception and she had a glass of wine in her hand, and somebody snapped a picture and tagged her on Facebook. Her Facebook, she's got everything private, she has done everything she's supposed to do, and somebody printed that off and mailed it, what a jerk, mailed it to her superintendent, HR, and then this gets even further. They summon her down and they say, this is just bad. You can resign right now or we will terminate you. And she resigned. That was the big problem. She resigned. So once you resign, very difficult for me to help you at that point in terms of getting that resignation retracted. You're under a contract. If they are going to terminate you, they have to give you a notice that they're going to do it. They have to give you an opportunity to get counsel, which I will get for you, and they have to give you a hearing. And I've been to them. So don't resign. Don't let anybody pressure you into resigning. But she didn't do anything. She was not drunk. She just had a glass of wine in her hand. She was at a wedding reception, had a glass of wine in her hand, and somebody got offended and decided to be a little over the top with that. So be real, please. Everything that I told you today, you can throw out of your mind if you need to, but this one right here is where it's getting people in trouble. They are friending students on Facebook. PSC hates that. That whole appearance of something bad, they get furious. There's this one guy on the PSC, why on earth would you do that? He's real, and he said, why on earth would you do that? And just yells and screams about it because it looks bad. The typical old rules apply too. Don't hit them, don't cuss at them, things like that. Don't threaten them, don't threaten their mamas. I taught with a lady, she was a guidance counselor, and I would go to her office and I would say, Mrs. Such and Such, and she would say, it's the thought that counts. If that mother's driving you crazy, you can think it, don't say it. It's the thought that counts. But those are your rules when it comes to dealing. Don't let them come over to your house. If they're in your neighborhood, yes, wave at them, but that's about it. Grocery shop away from the school. Grocery shop away from the school. They are nosy. Trust me. They will look there. They will look into your cart. What's she buying? Sure.
Facebook, we have problems with this every semester with candidates. Not necessarily here in Bibb County, but across programs
don't do that. But
Friending
we've had
anybody.
We've had those situations in our program, even after we say every year, don't friend students on Facebook. Or their parents, or, like you said, have them over to your house. I mean, that sounds like a great wonderful thing to get them to be friends with you, but it's not smart.
I have a PSC case that's been going on for almost a year now with that right there. Somebody over at the house, and at this point, unemployed and with an active PSC case. Twitter, same thing. Twitter, shut it down, or make sure it's private as can be. If you're going to, and you're going to have an online presence, it's the 21st century. Utilize every security precaution that online presence will give you. So that is the code of ethics on that note with Facebook. I have about 3 or 4 minutes, so does anybody have any questions specifically about any of this stuff? Anything. I'll take any kind of question about any of this stuff. Yes?
About the friending part, what if you grew up with a parent, you're a teacher candidate, but you grew up with a parent and the student is in your classroom?
So you've had a personal relationship with somebody. That's, here's what I'll say. The PSC, I get that, you get that. The PSC, I cannot guarantee you will get that.
Exactly. And what we say is, do not engage in that relationship as a teacher candidate. I mean, you gotta be able to separate that. And one of the reasons, and a lot of our students don't understand why we won't place our students in schools where they have children or family members, this is it right here. This is it right here. It makes it very difficult for you to draw the line, okay? And so we're trying to protect you as a candidate.
Anybody else? Yes, ma'am.
Babysitting.
Babysitting. And getting paid for it? Okay.
Or not getting paid for it.
When it goes to the Standard 6, it's going to be all about how the facts leading us up to this. How are these students in your class? And how did the parents find out that you were offering your services? If the answer is yes, and you offered your services, we have a problem. If they are at your school and you offer the services, we also have a problem. School system, I would even go so far, if any of you were to ever call me as a page member, one thing that page members hear from me all the time is, I will never tell a page member to roll the dice with PSC. Never. My goal is to keep you away from the PSC. So in that regard, I am always going to lean towards no. Where I always lean towards yes on reporting, I'm always going to lean towards no on something like that. Simply because of Standard 6. And there could be other ones.
Okay, I have two.
Okay.
One is kind of similar to what Deb just brought up, and it's tutoring. And that's something that we see a lot more common, is tutoring, whether you're a pre-service candidate or an in-service candidate. What does that look like? Because there's lots of teachers who offer tutoring services.
Okay.
So how is that perceived?
All right, so tutoring services. Question I get a lot is, my school system wants me to tutor. Sometimes they'll sling money with it. Hey, that's great. Money is good. But a school system, as your employer, there is a clause in your contract that says other duties as assigned. So the school system can make you tutor and not pay you for it if it's school related. I mean, it's really got to kind of be related to your contract. So with tutoring, I could see a lot of ins and outs that happen here. Is this something that, you kind of do on the side, that you're opening up to the general community kind of things? We have that sort of issue. And but it also goes back to, are you advertising at school? Are these your students? Is this your content area kind of things? These kinds of questions are what the PSC asks. And you said, so it's a lot of facts that get thrown in with these.
Right.
So.
Are you doing it on campus?
Are you doing it on campus? Are you using school stuff to do it?
Right.
Because at this point, if you're doing tutoring on the side, but it's so commingled with school, then you're really not. You're doing it as a school employee. Okay? So it just depends on how much you're commingling the two. There's no that commingling gets brought up a lot. And you said you had another question.
I do. I think it would be good to address this with them. A in-service candidate or a pre-service candidate or an in-service candidate teacher says, when the principal calls them in and says, hey, by the way, this has been going on, and you were in violation of Standard 2. And they say, I didn't know that.
Okay.
As a former administrator, used to hear that.
Yeah.
That's why I'm saying.
I didn't. There's a saying in the criminal courts that I think the PSC picks up on too, and that is that ignorance of the law is no excuse for breaking the law. The PSC publishes the Code of Ethics online, and the PSC requires principals to make their employees known about the Code of Ethics. Everybody knows about the Code of Ethics. And just how much people know about the Code of Ethics, like, I've been to many school systems giving a presentation like this. Some school systems don't. They have a PowerPoint they put together, and they say, read it and sign off that you read it. But bottom line is that the PSC says, we've published this right here for you, so you should have at least read this. And if you've read this, then you would have known. Another thing there that I could see a response there being would be, so you didn't know you were breaking the rules, so that's for the PSC to determine. That is for the PSC to determine. And once, as a principal, once it becomes reportable, same thing with you, you have to report it. You absolutely have to, or your license gets put in jeopardy. So, yeah, ignorance of these rules is not going to fare well. I'm telling you, the people at the PSC, they're not going to fare well with that one. Anybody else? Yes, ma'am.
Just to piggyback off of what she said, if you do get brought into a meeting like that, what as teachers is our first step? Do we contact Paige, or what do we do?
Yeah, the very first thing, if you're going to be brought into a meeting like that, there's a Supreme Court rule, and it was in our most recent Page 1 article, and is Page 1 in there? Okay, the most recent one? Let's see which one. I can probably tell by... I think that might... There is the most recent one. This might not be the most... Yes, it is. Turn to page 28. Perfect. God bless Leonard Williams. He's a colleague of mine, worked in our office. Take a look at page 28, the Garrity rule. If you're involved, and this goes to your question, if you're involved in a criminal aspect, if it's a criminal part, you want your employer to guarantee you certain rights. And there's a Supreme Court case called Garrity, and Garrity will allow, because your employer is not the police. Your employer is not going to read you Miranda, okay? They don't have to. Police would do that. But the Garrity rule allows the employer to cooperate with the employee and find out information from the employee that would not be reported to the police, but the employer has to agree to it. If your principal summons you into his or her office, rule number 1 is you don't want to be insubordinate. You have to go. But if you are getting into Code of Ethics territories, criminal stuff, what you want to say is, I will comply with everything you want from me. But before we go any further, can I just give somebody at Page a call? 90% of the time, the answer that you will hear there is yes. 10% of the time, you'll get, and this is certain school systems have this personality, none near here. No, you're going to answer my questions right now. Okay. Can I answer them in writing? Of course you can answer them. They love answering them in writing. And what you would then do is just give a blanket, 1-2 sentence, just blanket denial. Not even touch on the facts. Get copies of that, and then once you're freed from there, then give us a call. And that way, we could talk about all the facts and things. What I say to people is, sign documents saying that you got them, that you got copies of them. Make sure you write that. I got a copy. That's why I'm signing. I'm not signing to show I agree. And they cannot force you to sign a resignation. I'm trying to think of the other things that I tell people in here. In those kinds of meetings where they won't let you call beforehand, to just do more listening than talking. Take good notes, and then as soon as you can, pick up the phone and call one of us. But usually, a good principal says, of course you can. And I think there's a question over here. Yeah.
Can you address the reporting of sexual abuse that a teacher would hear that would be between students? Because you had talked about if it involves a student and a teacher or an adult.
Right.
But what about if you hear something about 2 children?
Okay, so a child is abusing or sexually abused. Usually it's a sexual abuse scenario. Another child, report. That is, child abuse is, what I always think of, I've had to really step away and reframe my definition of child abuse here. I've seen where somebody knew that the parent was, like, I think the kid was saying, my mom puts too much salt in my food. And there was like a huge debate between these 2 teachers who knew about, is that on purpose? Is this child abuse? Things like that. I mean, we're not thinking about child abuse the way, it's not hitting anymore. It's not just hitting, It covers many, many aspects, and the law is written very broadly in that regard to wrap everything up. Yes, ma'am.
I have a question about, do they use, like, let's say you report something, but then, it's not actually true or not actually used or something like that. Do they use your name? Like, the person reports, like, do they use your name? So, like, when the parents know that you just accused them?
Yeah. I get that question a lot. The police, you can certainly, some of this stuff would go to the police, and they could very well, a police report is going to be subject to open records, I think, and it's probably going to have your name on it. But usually what I say to people with that one is the parent's going to figure it out, even if they say, we're going to keep everything hush-hush. They're just going to say, well, who would report this? Where's that kid all day? And they're going to figure it out.
Let me ask you this about that. Can you report to defects anonymously?
I had this conversation with a lady not too long ago. Her circumstances warranted a report with her name on it. There is an after-hours defects number, I know that, where you can actually leave a message reporting, so I would say that it would be up to you at that point. And so the answer to that question off the top of my head, I don't know. I don't see why not.
Because if you have knowledge of it, and you don't report, or you report it anonymously, but it comes back that maybe you didn't report it.
Yeah.
Then you go, well, no, I did, I reported it anonymously.
Yeah.
What,
Well, what do you have to prove it?
Yeah, what do you have to prove it? So,
Yeah.
I think we have to be careful about that.
Yeah, it's a good point there. But the general question, I don't know if you can report anonymously or not. And the goal there is two things: report the whatever it is, and protect your own self. Anybody else? Yes, ma'am.
Okay, you've got the child that missed the bus, and the parent is, stuck in traffic, and some of the folks at school will say, oh, I'll just drive that child home. Or you can just drive that child home in your car. I don't care who does it.
Just don't do it.
But I have never put a child in my car to drive them anywhere. I would
Don't do it.
wait 2 hours if that's what
Wait at school. And I've seen that pops up at our office quite a bit. I took a kid home. I did, and there was this one thing that came up through our office was the kid said, oh, take me home. My mom's this, that, and the other. Calls him up. Of course you can take him home. Where do you live? Well, the kid was trying to get to his girlfriend's house. And so that's a problem. Now we're talking about taking someone where they're not supposed to be, unsupervised, things of that nature. Okay, I'll stay here. I'll stay here late at night, until you can get here. Yeah, don't have that access. All right, any last call for questions on that? One more.
The only good part of Facebook would be that we have 5 new stage chapters at several of the colleges that I work with, and I work with 10 Georgia colleges, and we have a very secure, like-only style Facebook pages, and the students communicate with each other and share ideas about their activities they're doing and that sort of thing, and this is where we say, you want me to just give, well, let's first say thank you.
Oh, well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it. You're going to have a great career. You'll be fine. Call me if you need me. That was loud.